Well, good morning to you, viewers. Let's begin what's trending. Over the weekend, President Bola Tinubu traveled to Saint Lucia for a state visit and to kick off a two-nation diplomatic tour of the Caribbean and South America. Tinubu was welcomed with full military honors by Saint Lucia's Governor General, Cyril Charles, and the country's Prime Minister, Philippe Pierre. Let's take a look.
Fire salute! Present! Us! Let's go. Fire salute! Present! Us!
Full military salute with our national anthem. I mean, the president was well received, but you know, there have been comments online. I'll take a comment from Labour Party leader who has strongly criticized the president's trip to Saint Lucia, calling it ill-timed and insensitive, given Nigeria's severe socio-economic challenges. Peter Obi's tweet reads in part. He wrote, in the past 2 years, Nigeria has lost more people to all sorts of criminality than a country that is officially at war. Nigerians are hungrier, and most people do not know where their next meal will come from. With such a gory picture of one's country, you can imagine my bewilderment when I saw a news release from the presidency announcing that President Bola Tinubu is departing Nigeria today for a visit to Saint Lucia in the Caribbean. This is a president going for leisure when he couldn't visit Niger State, where over 200 lives were lost and over 700 persons still living in a flood natural disaster. I wonder which type of incident will happen before a president is attracted to show fiscal sympathy to the distressed citizens. He went on to commend the president for visiting Benue. He further wrote, I don't think the situation in this country today calls for leisure for anybody in a position of authority, more so the president, on whose desk the buck stops. This regime has repeatedly shown its insensitivity and lack of passion for the populace, going by the way it prioritizes the rich and shows indifference to the poor. In the meantime, the presidency has defended Tinubu's trip as a strategic diplomatic engagement aimed at deepening Nigeria's ties with Caribbean nations and fostering South-South cooperation rather than a leisure excursion. In a statement released by Bayo Ononuga, Special Advisor to the President on Information and Strategy, the visit aims to rekindle ancestral bonds and open new diplomatic, cultural, and economic avenues, given the significant population of Nigerian descent and shared historical ties. He also described the visit as a rare historic diplomatic event, with Nigeria being one of fewer than 10 state visits that Saint Lucia has hosted since its independence, and the first by an African head of state since Nelson Mandela in 1998. Well, Peter Obi continues to maintain that this trip is inappropriate, and he still maintains that, you know, it's a leisure trip, given what the country is facing at this moment. Dr. Abati, your thoughts?
Well, I disagree with Mr. Peter Obi. I don't think it's a leisure trip. I've always argued on this table that President Bola Tinubu, or anybody who is President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, is the #1 public relations officer of Nigeria. He's the chief foreign affairs policy person for Nigeria. And if President Tinubu, as the chief foreign affairs policy person, is reaching out to the South-South, the global South-South, and going to the Caribbean and South America, I think that the point by Mr. Ononuga about how we have shared historic, cultural affinity with Saint Lucia and other countries in the Caribbean, I think that the points are well made. After all, Sir Danley Alexander who succeeded Sir Teslim Olawale Elias, as Chief Justice of the Federation, 1975 to 79, came from this same Saint Lucia. Now, Sir Daniel Alexander's son, Michael, also fought in the Nigerian Civil War. In other words, even at the personal level, there is that connection. So if President Tinubu is saying he's reaching out to the Caribbean and to, that part of the world, I think it's in order. I recall that when President Jonathan was in office, he also reached out, to that part of the world. We were in Trinidad and Tobago, we were in another country, and on those occasions, President Jonathan addressed joint session of parliament in those, Caribbean countries where they still have a parliamentary system of government. And President Tinubu is also going to address a joint sitting of the parliament of Saint Lucia, which I think is a honorable thing to do. I do not see any objections here. Even if it is at the cultural level, there's something called, cultural diplomacy, reaching out to Africans in diaspora, people who were taken away. In fact, some of the people in Saint Lucia, they trace their ancestry to this country, Nigeria. So in the spirit of fraternity, brotherhood, cultural diplomacy, I think that the trip is in order. So what we don't expect is that it's not a trip that is going to take forever now. So Caribbean, South America. So I disagree absolutely with Mr. Peter Obi on this one.
Okay. You see, we can talk about cultural significance and other things between Nigeria and Saint Lucia. We can even talk about the history of the Caribbean, talk about Jamaica, where there's a place called, Calabar, stretch it up to Brazil, Bahia, the Yoruba extraction and all of that. But what Peter Obi is saying is apt. I think he has a strong point. Niger States, flood. Oji, let me paint a picture for you this morning. Days after the flooding, decaying bodies were taken off the streets in Niger State, in Mokwa, decaying bodies. The president did not visit the place. In fact, even Benue, we had to shout until the president finally decided, and they made a jamboree out of it. I mean, we're there, we're talking about the jamboree now. We talked about what transpired.
Yeah, with students.
So what he's saying invariably is that there's a time that the president sits and gets things done. Nigerians like to have this false equivalence between presidents. Sometimes when it suits them, they will say, oh, there's flood in Nigeria, there's flood in America too. Compare with other presidents. Is this how they are always out every time? When the pertinent issues happen in there, they are not there. So President Tinubu has gone at the expense of taxpayers' money to go to Saint Lucia, a country with less than 180,000 people, a country that is not even up to Ajah in population. He has gone with taxpayers' money. He's going to address a parliament of a country that is not up to Ajah in population. I mean,
yeah, this
what we are just saying, we are not saying don't travel.
Yeah.
We are not saying you can't go and do cultural ties.
Rufai,
What we are saying is...
the VP went to Niger State.
Dr. Abati, what we are saying is...
The VP went there.
Dr. Abati, with due respect, is the VP we voted for.
No, but the VP went there to represent the president.
Can't you see that is the VP we voted for? But you see, when you say things like that, Dr. Abati, but when it's politics time, the president will go to Niger and campaign. But when it's distress time, he can't go to Niger and feel empathy with it.
I guess what we're saying is there's a time for everything.
There's a time for everything. And that's what Peter Obi was saying.
Go ahead.
So, I always like to say two things can be true at the same time. So I
yeah.
think both things have merit. On the Saint Lucia side, so last year, Saint Lucia was elected to the presidency of the Executive Board of UNESCO. And one of the people who led that campaign, that successful campaign, was Gilbert Chaguri, who the president has referred to as his as a development partner, not just into Nigeria. So a part of me feels like, well, is it possible that the trip to Saint Lucia has something to do with Nigeria campaigning for a more visible role with UNESCO, deepening, cultural exchanges and so forth, of which we stand to benefit from. There's a lot of visibility, partnerships and so forth that would come from, deepening our ties with organizations such as UNESCO, especially because we know how much our cultural achievements have put us on the map globally. On the other part, I think it's also fair for Peter Obi and Nigerians to say that we'd like to see more of the president in different parts of Nigeria.
Yes.
I think both things can be true.
Yes.
Let's see you. Remember when he went to Benue State, there was the issue of the road. He couldn't actually get to Mokwa because the road was bad and so forth. So I think people are saying if you spend more time in different parts of Nigeria, you'd actually get a more realistic sense of the situation on the ground.
Especially with the heightened insecurity, just only recently with the death toll in Benue and Borno and all those northern states. Well.